Hello again, Friliqui here. In this video, I'm going to take a shot at reviewing Age of Empires Definitive Edition, hyphen Definitive Edition. Now, I know the game was released back in February, but it's one of the first RTS games that I ever played, and it really cemented my love for the genre. I figured what better place to start than with the game that I used to play back on my old compact computer back in, I think, 1998? In terms of visuals, the game is almost exactly as I remembered it. Now, obviously the graphics have been updated, but it still has that same appearance slash feel of the 1998 game. In fact, the game does allow you to use the classic 1998 dataset if you're so inclined, but after trying the two, I prefer the definitive edition dataset. Unless, of course, I just really want to feel like I was back in 1998, in which case I probably have to hunt down a compact computer, which I don't think they make anymore. Do they? I'm not. I should probably look that up. Anyway, everything just has far more detail in the definitive edition and definitive edition dataset. And from the buildings to the units to just about everything but the fire, I often find myself just enjoying the side of the game as opposed to playing to meet any sort of objective. The natural environments seen on any map are gorgeous, and I mean the water. I mean, if who doesn't like fluid water? It really looks like water. Um, Aesthetically, the game is just pleasing. After going back and looking at some screenshots of the old 1998 edition, as well as trying the 1998 dataset, I can't help but appreciate the updates to the graphics. Nevertheless, it's the game's ability to maintain the same focus and feel of the old 1998 game, along with updating the graphics, that really makes me appreciate the definitive edition visually. So when it comes to the audio, the first thing that really comes to mind is just the music. It's really one of the more enjoyable aspects of the game. The same tracks that I remember hearing when I first played the game are still very much enjoyable. When I originally played the game, I used to imagine that the music was like filling the streets and that villagers and soldiers were going along with it, and it really just worked well with the overall game. However, there is one thing that I have this like love-hate relationship with, and that's the sound that each individual unit makes. The one that really just bothers me, kind of irks me, is the priest. It goes like "Wololo," and every other sound that he makes is just it's too much for me. Maybe it's just that I hate having him convert my units whenever he's on the other side, or that he has to constantly say it over and over again as he's healing the units. I know he uses two different ones, but I don't like, or maybe more than that. I just don't like hearing it. But it's just it's just this personal preference, or not even I just don't like hearing it. So yeah, some of the sounds are hit and miss. Most are meh. Some are pretty memorable, in a good way, not like the priest. Like some of the phrases the villagers say are pretty endearing when they do say it, but most are just kind of they're serviceable. So when it comes to the gameplay, it operates almost exactly as I remembered it did, which is more of a mixed blessing than I originally thought going into it. It was easy for me just to hop into the game and play, as every unit, building, and tech did just about exactly what I remembered it did previously, or from the original version, as you would expect from this sort of game. However, there was some aspects of the gameplay that I wish were updated in much the same lines as the graphics. For example, I hated that units would just collide with each other and stay stuck for a while, unless moved away from one another. Um, or I think they eventually figure it out for themselves. Now that's great as long as they're not being fired on, in which case they're going to die trying to figure out who's going right and who's going left. Um, Positioning your units is also frustrating. I miss the modern convenience of just being able to rotate your units to face the direction you want them to face, or just to fall into a certain formation. Now, I know these mechanics weren't in the original game, but I do think it wouldn't have hurt the game if they were implemented in the definitive edition mode. Um, oh, and I still don't think that it makes much sense that catapults are healed by priests. Now, if boats need villagers, then catapults should need villagers too, right? Or, I mean, it's a small thing, but still, I think it makes more sense. Um, or I guess if it's some sort of representative of them hitting it just it should use the villagers. In any case, the combat is pretty straightforward. There is some unit balancing that can be utilized. If you're not into just amassing cavalry and hoplites, you can use a nice mix and match balance of archers and so on. But I just tended to find myself amassing a certain kind of troops. Um, this diplomacy is pretty much ignorable. Every game I try to use it, but I often just end up taking what I want from my allies, as opposed to trying, or my enemies, as opposed to trying to work it out. Trade has its advantages, but again, it's pretty easy to just ignore it and just ultimately take what you want. So in the end, I feel the game mechanics, the gameplay, it's the word I would use is serviceable. I mean, you can play it. Uh, it's I never really found it when I was originally playing the game to be particularly great. Even with archers and slingers and all that, I still felt that it was kind of bland. But it is an element that is I find to be you know, it works. It pretty much works. When it comes to immersion, the game does an excellent job of tying the sounds, visuals, and to a lesser extent, gameplay and combat into one unified immersive experience. As I am building my cities in a scenario or a custom player, I can easily make myself believe that I'm overlooking some ancient city, whether it's Athens or Rome. It's not so much that obviously they didn't look like the way they're portrayed in the game, they weren't even closely set up to that when you set them up in a multiplayer or custom single player. But it's just the only way I can describe it is the feel is there. It just feels like I'm there. Yeah, that's the best I can give for that. The campaigns themselves are sort of lacking. They do a decent enough job of setting up the scenario, but the delivery is really just another map with the opposing computer configured in a different way and slightly varied objectives. For example, in the Trojan War scenario, you had Odysseus, Ajax, and Achilles all present as your heroes, but they really just felt like any other unit. At times, I would completely lose track of them, and Odysseus even died on me in one of my playthroughs. I didn't really feel like Agamemnon in that scenario, nor did I feel like Caesar in the Roman campaigns. Or, but I did feel like Hannibal slightly more, but not in any significant way. Maybe it's just the elephants or something. In terms of investment, I suppose the best thing I can say is if you spend a lot of time building your city in a custom single player, then you more than likely be invested in completing that game. As far as the investments in the campaign, well, poor Odysseus can tell you how invested I was. On the one hand, he did randomly die on me, but on the other hand, I did eventually notice that he died on me. So ultimately, I think the game's immersion is more a sum of its parts than any one thing. So, in terms of longevity, I used to play the old 1998 version of it. Was it 98, 97? The original version of the game for hours, using the editor to come up with different kinds of scenarios or just playing a custom match against the computer. I never really enjoyed the multiplayer, I suppose partially because I was never really that good at it. But uh, you know, I primarily play this game for nostalgia's sake. I can see myself playing through each campaign, but I don't think I will do much more than that with it. I certainly will be spending hours crafting new scenarios, nor will I play many, if any, custom games, just because there's other options out there to keep me entertained, especially if I'm looking for an RTS experience. I might maybe try my hand at the multiplayer at some point, but I don't foresee it holding my attention for very long. I'm not even sure if people still play it online. I honestly haven't even clicked that button. I might check just for curiosity, I suppose, at some point. So wrapping things up, I imagine this game was produced, released for the purpose of cashing in on nostalgia. They certainly got my money. The moment I heard about it, I knew that I would eventually have to grab it. Day one purchase, not so much. But I did eventually purchase it on sale, but I did purchase it. Um, I told myself in the beginning, you have to buy it just to support it, but I was thinking, I don't. I still have the original game. Can I just go back and play it? But I feel like I'm glad that I purchased this definitive edition. If for nothing else, the addition of the graphics was just stellar. But beyond that, I can't think of anything that would keep me playing this game beyond, you know, nostalgia at this point. Um, so yeah, it's pretty much a nostalgia purchase for me. So if you were born in the 90s, or you did a lot of your gaming during the 90s, maybe even earlier than that, then this game, you owe it to yourself to purchase the game just for nostalgia's sake, and maybe hop on and play the classic edition if you haven't already purchased it. At this point, I imagine people have purchased it if they wanted to, but wait for sales, and just like I did. Um, so in any case, if I didn't lose you at some point during this video, thanks for watching to the end. And that's it.